Well, howdy folks, welcome to another episode of Bikes, Burgers, Beers. Today we're going on a little ride down to the beautiful western suburbs of Sydney. We're going to go see Chewie. He's run into a problem with his motorcycle. It won't go. We're thinking it's electrical, so I'm taking my multimeter with me, and we're going to do some testing. So if you want to see how to diagnose the not warm enough. Let's start again. If you want to see how to diagnose a charging system for a ZZR 600 or any bike really, it's all the same. Then definitely stick around for that. Where the magic happens. The dulcet tones of suburbia. Alright folks, well I'm gonna go say hi to Chewie, and we're gonna hopefully diagnose his motorcycle. Alrighty.
I am recording.
Okay. Howdy folks, welcome to another episode of Bikes, Burgers, Beers. Except we're not at Bikes, Burgers, Beers. We're at Chewie's. And today we're diagnosing a problem with the lovely ZZR 600 because it let go on him, it cut out on him, it gave up, but we're going to help fix it. So we're thinking it's the regulator rectifier, not charging the battery. We're going to look at that, but I'm going to run through some checks today to help diagnose what it could be, because there's nothing worse than doing the shotgun approach, replacing a whole bunch of stuff when you could save hundreds of dollars figuring out, oh, it's just that, or it could even just be this plug here that's a bit melted right now. But that indicates that it could be something else. So we're going to try to find the cause of the problem, which will automatically fix the problem. First thing we're going to do is I like to check if the stator windings are okay. So this plug that goes into the regulator rectifier, I don't really need a wiring diagram to check, but generally the three yellow wires, and this is pretty universal on most motorcycles, the three yellow wires here are the three windings that come off the stator that is in the engine of the motorcycle. And all I need to see there, I'm going to do two tests with this, all I need to see there to start with is that they're actually connected to each other. Now you'll need a multimeter for this. Multimeters tend to have what's called a diode setting. It's when you get a short, you hear a beep like that. So I'm just going to get each of these yellow wires connected to each other. So beep, beep, good. And then we go to the next one and test those two. Same thing. Last one. Okay, so those all appear to be connected okay. Now the other two wires that are on this plug, which are what appears to be possibly black and white, they're in the plug up here. They shouldn't have any connection because one will be positive, one will be negative, and basically that runs to your battery coming out of the regulator rectifier as DC voltage. So what's the regulator rectifier actually do? Simply put, it turns AC voltage, which goes positive, negative, like the ABC logo, if you're Australian. If you're not Australian, well, sucks to be you. And what it does is it turns it into DC, which is a nice, smooth 14.4 volts you hear about that charges the battery and powers the rest of the accessories on the motorcycle. So that shouldn't have any connection there at all, but we'll be able to check that later on once we get the bike started at least. Now, Chewie, have you charged the battery?
Yes.
Excellent. So we will need to start the bike in a moment to check that. The other thing I'm going to check while I'm checking the diode setting on the multimeter is those same three yellow wires. They will plug into these three prongs here. Alright, so these 3 prongs here we can see, and you can see there's 2 here and there's a gap there. Okay, these 3 prongs are where those yellow wires that I just tested come to. And what we want to do is attach our probes from the multimeter on there, still in the diode test. That's all I need to hear. I don't even need to look at the multimeter. But we need to check that there's continuity there, but in one direction only. Because what happens is a regulator rectifier does 2 jobs. It regulates the voltage to 14.4 volts so the battery doesn't overcharge and blow up. The rectifier part, what that means is actually converting AC into DC voltage. It's kind of a one-way street. Hard to understand, but trust me on this. And what will happen is if it's working right, you'll get a beep one way, which we're not getting. And if I swap the probes around, we're not getting any sign of life at all, which could mean that the regulator rectifier is actually stuffed. So that's a bit of a good sign that that might be stuffed, but we need to do some more checks just to make 100% sure. The hunch is regulator rectifier stuffed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the battery in the bike, we're going to start the bike up without the regulator rectifier plugged in, so the battery will not be charging, and I'm going to measure the AC voltage coming out of these 3 prongs here that I tested at the beginning of the video. And what I need is I'll test in between each 3 yellow wires. I'm looking for voltages around anywhere between 20 to 40 volts AC. So you set your multimeter to voltage on the AC voltage, not DC. While we've got the battery in and not hooked up to anything, it's also good to test the voltage of the battery here. So I'm going to come around this side so you can also see the voltage that comes up on the multimeter screen. And I'm just going to put my positive probe on the positive side of the battery and negative on the negative. Now this isn't a great test because all it does is show you the voltage, which seems pretty healthy as it's just come off a charger. Where it really matters is when you're testing the voltage under load, because if the voltage drops below sort of 10 or 9 volts, then you've got a problem. So 13.21 volts, that's really healthy for a battery just sitting there. So let's continue hooking the battery up and start the bike up. Alright, so we've got our setup now to check the AC voltage coming out of the stator, just to eliminate that it's not the stator, because that's probably going to be A, most expensive, and 2, it's going to be a pain in the butt to replace. Because it means engine side cover off, all that sort of stuff. No one wants to do that. It's much easier replacing the regulator rectifier or the battery. So I've set my multimeter down here to AC volts, and normally that means a squiggly line if you've got a multimeter. And I've got my probes connected to the 2 yellow wires, 2 of the 3 yellow wires coming out of the stator from the engine. Alright, so you just want a nice secure connection there. And I've just gone in the back there so it's making some contact. Let's make sure that's okay. I'll be swapping these over anyway and watching the voltages change on here. So we're going to start the bike up. Doesn't need to run very long. We just need to go, yep, that's working, done. So let's get the bike going. Choke. And go, eh? Alright folks, so I don't know if you can hear me, I'll overdub this if you can't, but we can see one of the sides we're getting about 24 volts, 23, 24 volts AC. That's a good sign, that's a really good sign. So if we have a look down here at the probes, I'm going to swap this black one over to the other side, or just connect it here, and if we look at the multimeter I'm getting the same voltage. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is go into that one, check that, 24, so same voltage, perfect, and then move over my probe to this side, and I'm getting the same voltage again no matter what. That's fantastic, that means your stator is great. So we'll turn the bike off now. We've just confirmed that the stator is absolutely fine. We're getting the same voltages on each one of those yellow wires. And just to eliminate any discrepancies, I'm checking each of those two wires and then swapping the probes over and check them again just to be certain. It's good to double check these things. So that's fantastic news for Chewie. He doesn't have to replace his stator.
Yes!
We've confirmed that we're getting AC voltage from the stator. Chewie's very happy about that, so am I. Next thing we're going to do is plug this back in, and look, the plug is a bit melted, so it's highly likely that the regulator rectifier is possibly stuffed. But again, this is all about confirming it, because you don't want to go replacing that and finding out something else. I've set my multimeter to DC voltage now. Now I've set it to 20 volts DC. A lot of multimeters have automatic ranging, so you don't have to worry about that little detail. First thing I'm going to do is start the bike up again. I'm just going to check the voltage on the battery. In theory, we should be seeing about 14 volts or something while the bike's running. Now if that happens, what that means is that perhaps the regulator rectifier is fine. We know the stator is fine. It could just mean this plug is a bit dicky. And it is a bit melted, so it could just mean that it's not making the right connection. It could just mean the connections are dirty, which is highly likely because it is an old plug. So you can see on that particular side, the plug is very melted, very much melted. And yeah, it's a sign, you know. You kind of look at that and go, okay, you can see it's not square on this edge anymore, where it's kind of folding over. That's not nice. And on this side too, there's a little bit of wear there, but that's not really melted, so that's okay. The other thing is the contacts are all pretty dirty, so it's worth just spraying them with a bit of contact clean. But for testing out all this stuff, we are just going to plug this in now and start the bike up again and check the voltages at the battery. So what I've done here, I've got my probes from the multimeter directly on the battery, and we're measuring the voltage here, 13.13 volts right now. I've plugged the regulator rectifier back in, so in theory we should be getting some sort of charge to the battery. I'm going to start the bike back up again, and you see when I turn the key the voltage drops because the headlight's on and all that stuff, so it's starting to draw current from the battery. And it's also good to see what the voltage does when you start the bike. You might see it drop down to about 9 or 10 volts on the multimeter. Alrighty folks, so the bike's idling right now and we can actually see that it's doing around 14 volts. So that tells me it's actually charging the battery fine, and if I rev the bike it should jump to about 14.5. .3, close enough. But we can see it's maintaining that around there. So it could have just been that this plug, because it's melted, is not sitting right and the contacts were dirty, and it actually just shows you that there's nothing wrong with the bike at all, which is fantastic news. That's actually going fine. So it could have just been the plug's a bit dirty and because it's melted. Yeah. You know, because watch what happens, actually, this is a good test. If that plug is dirty or the contacts are not clean or it falls out, watch what happens to the multimeter when I pull the plug out. Look at that. The voltage dropped by about a volt. And if we keep the bike running like this, that's just going to keep dropping because the battery's going to go flat. But if I plug that back in, it'll start rising again and it'll start going back up to 14 volts. Look at that. So good news is the bike's charging fine. The only bad news is I'd probably just want to replace that plug, which are pretty standard automotive plugs because most regulator rectifiers have a standard plug there. You should be able to buy that anywhere. These clips, see there's little tongues there on the clips? So the good thing is you can replace this plug right here and have a new plug there to fit onto the regulator rectifier and give a good connection to the terminals. You should be able to pop these out by just depressing these slightly. You don't need to hit it with a 200-pound gorilla. And see how they bend, and when you bend them, that unlocks it and you'll be able to pull them out. best thing to do is take a photo of what these look like, so you're putting them in on the right side, in the correct way, I should say. Your 3 yellow wires here, it actually won't really matter which direction they go in. You could put this one here, it doesn't matter. The bit that does matter is the important side here, where it's charging your battery and going to ground. These two have to be situated the correct way. If you put this wire on this side, you're not going to have any charging. You're going to blow the battery up because you're going to have reverse polarity, and you'll probably blow all your headlights and fuses and God knows what else. That's going to be the easy way to fix this, is try to get one of these new plugs, which fortunately are universal, because regulator rectifiers mostly have a universal plug. Should be able to pick this up hopefully at an auto parts store, maybe even a bike shop might have them. We'll see, how, it all depends. We'll try to source one, replace this plug, give the contacts a clean, job done. So that's how to diagnose your electrical system if you're having a fault with your charging and you think it's something like a flat battery or something like that. The reality is that once you test these things out or know how to, and I hope this video does show you how to, you'll be able to eliminate one of the problems. And imagine if Chewie spent 50 or 100 or 200 bucks on a brand new regulator rectifier and he didn't have to. So in this case he doesn't have to, which is fantastic. And yeah, that's how to check your charging system on any bike, not just the ZZR 600. It's all the same. Thanks for watching. That's fantastic news for Chewie. He doesn't have to replace his stator.
Yes!
My out of focus thumb.
I can't focus that quickly. I'm not that good.
The next test is we are going to plug this plug.
Hang on, you're going to say that again.
Yeah, I will. I'll word that better too.
Yeah, but I completely had wrong everything. Exposure and focus.
These artists.